I'm sure it was.
Hey, Ann. Can you hear us? Can you hear us?
Hear you.
Okay, so we actually have, wait a couple more minutes because we need to wait to start at 6:30, but you have a quorum. And you have your council liaison who wasn't
Perfect. Yay.
So I will, and I went ahead, just as a reminder, I've got, you just tell me when you want to move through things. I've got the PowerPoint presentation to make.
Okay. Is there anyone extra in there with you guys?
Yes, sorry, hold on. We do have so far one guest, but I think we will have more.
Okay.
Oh, other way.
Camera's coming your way.
It's coming that way. She's sitting so far on the edge.
No, you're fine.
You don't have to.
You're there in the lower right, left.
We can see you in the corner. All right. So yeah, just one more minute and then you can get started.
Okay.
And I figured we're gonna wait and do our whole set of introductions for new members for next month because we're missing 3 members.
Okay.
So it'll probably make it easier to do it in that way. Historic preservation? Yeah, you can go ahead and have a seat on the outside edge. You guys can at least introduce yourself name wise, but like our longer introductions, we've got so much on the agenda.
I'm right. Doug, nice to meet you.
Emily.
And I think you're good to go.
All right. Okay, perfect. So this is the Historic Preservation Commission meeting for Tuesday, September 12th. Welcome to our new member this month. Like Mara said, we do have a pretty full agenda. So let's first start off with the approval of the minutes from the August 8th meeting. If you guys can just review that quickly.
Move that we approved them.
I was gonna say, ask since I'm kind of new, do you want typos?
Yes, yes, please.
On. Should I mark these up better? Sorry.
Under 543 North Elm, it's a family dwelling.
Oh, yeah.
I think the other one is the same way, right?
Oh, yeah, one of two. And on page 3 of 3, the last thing before old business, there's an extra space between the semicolon and Sue and Delicato's last name.
Yep.
I had another one, but I lost it.
Oh. That,
Go over some things.
Yeah, I'm an editor at heart, so
That's
somewhere
awesome.
my mind goes.
Yeah.
anything else? Sorry, that can be Ann.
Did we have, I'm sorry, I heard Doug, right?
Yeah, there were like three minor changes. But with those changes, I moved that we approved.
Second.
Do we have a second?
Yeah.
Okay, all of those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, we don't have any public hearings on the agenda for tonight's meeting. Are there any visitor comments regarding any topics not listed on the agenda? Okay. So that'll take us into new business, which we have 5 demolition recommendations. So the first one is 416 North Elm Avenue, built in 1940. The city found no records pertaining to historic property inventory sheet. It hasn't been previously identified as an at-risk property. And staff recommends the approval of the request to demolish the existing single-family dwelling structure.
I have a question. So it's a duplex, so 420 is the other side. What do you do in that case?
So I know that they are coming through with a number of different ones. My understanding is they will be also requesting for the other one. But there, I think, is someone living in the other side. So they're allowing that person to live through that lease before they would request the other one. So there's no time frame once you get approved for this. We've had some where we've approved it and then a year later, someone has renovated it instead. But it's on the record that they have to get this step taken in order to move through with their next step. So a lot of people come in earlier with a plan, if they have one that's available, that's open, they get the inspection done and they make the request for the demolition.
There really doesn't appear to be any reason to hold the request.
I agree.
Does anyone want to make a motion to approve demolition?
I'll make a motion to approve the demolition of 416 North Elm Avenue.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is there anyone opposed? Okay, moving on, the next property is 16 Fox Place. Single family dwelling, built in 1925, no records pertaining to historic property inventory. It's not been previously identified as an at-risk property. And staff recommends approval of the request to demolish the existing single family dwelling.
Make a motion to approve the demolition price for 16 Fox. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Is there anyone opposed? Okay. Next property is 3421 South Brentwood Boulevard. Again, this is listed as a single family dwelling. It is a duplex. So Mara, I'm assuming it's probably a similar situation as the 416 North Elm.
That would be correct.
Okay. So single family dwelling built in 1966. There's no records pertaining to historic property inventory sheet. It has not been previously identified as an at-risk property, and staff does recommend approval to request of the request to demolish the existing single family dwelling.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Is there anyone opposed? Okay. So that brings us to 12 Euclid Avenue. This is a single family dwelling that was built according to St. Louis County records in 1920. But research was done for the North Webster Walks, indicates it's likely from around 1900. There is text included in this from the North Webster Walk. Staff hasn't found any documentation to prove that it was built in 1920 or before. And there was some additional research that was pulled with this regarding past occupants. And because of some of that and possibly the age, staff does recommend further review of the history. So it looks like the family that lived there around the late 1920s to 40s had a son who graduated from Douglas High School and was an older person for the city of Rock Hill. So in your packets, there were some newspaper articles regarding that family.
Do we know when this was last inhabited?
That I don't know. I could go back and look at some of the documentation. I believe it's been a while since someone has. The owner had been asking for a while about the potential demolition. I had talked with them about the fact that I had some concerns about both the age, the Webster Walk, the 2-car garage that's attached, according to aerial photographs, appears to have been built around 2001. So it used to have a detached garage, and then the house itself stood alone without the attached garage. I know at certain points, they've been using it as a rental property. And then I had run some numbers on building a single family house there, but it's very narrow. The lot is smaller than you think because there's a second lot next to it that's vacant, so people think that it's a larger lot. It's a very narrow lot and it's not very deep, which means it's gonna be a very difficult lot to build a single family home on as itself. So it had been kind of bouncing back and forth in my department, and then they did finally turn in this paperwork. And I felt like we probably should spend a little more time looking at it. It is.
Yeah, it's a really nice house, actually.
Yeah,
It has a beautiful foundation.
I agree that the configuration of it makes me think that it is older than 1920. Yeah,
So is Mr. Willard's claim to fame, Mr. Hubbard, excuse me, claim to fame that he was an alderman? I mean,
That's only the information I was able to quickly find in a real quick search. So I was able to find, using the address itself, I found a birth record that he was born at that house. I wasn't able to find anything that proved that the house was built before 1920. And then that's when I was able to find some of the things about, he played baseball and football for Douglas School, and then the name then tied in with newspaper articles about him being an alderperson for Rock Hill. That's about all I found in a 15-minute search, just to sort of say, hey, I feel like we might need to take a deeper look at this one before you make a determination.
So given the small size of the lot, you're thinking it's possible that they would combine the lots and put something larger up?
They don't own the lot next door.
Okay.
Church.
Yeah, it's the church. Church owns the lot next door.
Okay.
So they don't own the lot next door. There's not an ability to boundary adjust with the property on the other side either. So it's kind of on its own and it's not very deep. So it will be difficult to do. It can't have a frontage attached garage because of the code regulations. So you have to have a detached. There's almost no backyard because of where the front yard is established, because it's not a deep lot. So there's a lot of issues with if you did tear down, what you could do with the lot,
So it could stay vacant for a long time.
potentially.
Potentially.
I mean, I personally would like to do a little bit more research just because of the age discrepancy. That we don't have that much research on if it is older than 1920s. That's something I would kind of like to dig a little deeper in. I know the oldest article, Mara, that you had in there was the birth record, and I believe it was like 1927.
That is correct. I did find one in 1925, which just talked about, there was a man who lived there, last name Whitfield, who wanted to do porter or janitor work. So I put in, like, in the paper, that he could be a porter or a janitor. And it gave the address of 12 Euclid. But I had not gone any further. I hadn't gone into the library records to do the deed, because once we don't have the building permit records prior to 1918. So if we're gonna go any farther back than that, the only thing we have are the tax records. We could do tax records, but those are by last name. So that again, it's a lot more digging that I didn't have time to do.
Sure.
So it sounds like the consensus is that we will postpone and do further work.
I mean, personally, I would like to look into this a little further just to see if we can get more of an accurate timeline on when it was built and if there were other prior occupants to the Hubbards and the article that Morrow found in 1925.
And the fact that it was on the walk, if it was considered significant enough to put it on the walk. That it's telling that it does have historic value.
I hadn't gotten that far.
Anyway,
Come on.
you also, do you have access to the, what do they call it, the finding aid at the Historical Society? Because if it's on the Webster Walk, that means it was put together by the Historical Society. which
So
means
that-
they may have more information.
That last walk was one that was done by the commission. Versus like the first walks were done by the Historical Society. The very last one was one that was a commission that had. Can I not remember her name right now? Who did the research and wrote it?
And
No,
Henrietta.
no, she's
She was on the board, wasn't she?
no, she wasn't on the board.
Okay.
Sorry, let me see if I can find her, but anyway, she's still around. She worked for the city of St. Louis, with the historic, doing some other history. She's a historical writer.
Mimi Harris?
No,
Yeah,
she's,
Anna McReynolds is here.
no, she's younger. She's like,
Oh, I know you mean Amanda.
nope, it's not. I'll find her. I have her on Facebook. I'll find her. Sorry, why can I not remember? But anyway,
Amanda Clark.
the commission is the one for that last walk, for the North Webster Walk, that hired her versus the Historical Society. So that one was a slightly different walk than the first 7 walks. So I can go find the documentation on who we hired. Why can I not remember her name? Lynn Jossie.
We
Did the research.
It's all these brains.
It took a moment. Lynn Jossie. So we can check in with her because she is the one who did the research.
Well, since I volunteer at the Hagen House in the Archives on Fridays, and if you want me to look, I can,
Oh,
and I have
yeah.
access through the internal.
That would be great.
I can try to see if there's anybody in
So, Anne, if you want to make a motion, we usually state that we're gonna carry it to the next meeting and then make sure it's on the agenda for the next meeting to discuss.
Yes, am I able to make a motion or should someone
You
else?
can't, someone else has to.
I'll make a motion. Oh, go ahead.
Not trying to word it, but I make a motion to defer authorizing demolition of Euclid
And if we can, I say that we're gonna defer it to the next meeting.
next meeting.
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is there anyone opposed? All right. The last property of our demolition recommendations is 123 Dornell Avenue. I just want to state full disclosure, this is the street next to my street and I do know the property owner. So I'm just gonna read what's on this slide and then you guys can kind of discuss this. The existing single-family dwelling was built in 1954. City has found no records pertaining to a historic property inventory sheet for the property. The property has not been previously identified as an at-risk property. And staff does recommend approval of the request to demolish the existing single-family dwelling.
And additional information in case I think I put some of it in there. They did purchase the property. They've consolidated it with the lot to the south, which is partially in the floodplain. They've also consolidated it with a lot on the next street over. And they are going to be on the Architecture Review Board agenda for the next meeting for just informational only for a new house on that lot. So they've been working on that, keeping it out of the floodplain. And that would be next steps if they go through approval. And then there's a couple other things they still need to do, but they've started for a new house.
So we don't have a demolition request for the adjacent property.
There's nothing on, they're vacant,
What about the one behind it?
that's vacant also,
Okay.
yeah.
It doesn't appear to have any significant historic significance from the information provided.
Is there anything about a kit house that makes it unusual? It's called a kit house. But I don't know exactly what that is. I mean, I know fish houses, but I don't.
I couldn't find anything specific. It's not a Sears Kit Home. It's not one of our Lustrons, obviously. It's, you know, there's a couple others out there, but not one that I tied to this particular location.
There's some better examples on that street of the style house that's already been renovated. And this one does seem like a really challenging house to renovate.
And there are other ones on that block that have been renovated in the last couple of years.
You mentioned the floodplain. Is there an appetite with those properties combined that there's enough room to build out of the?
Completely out of the floodplain, correct. In fact, they're moving it higher up on the hill to keep it out of the floodplain.
I mean, we approve of the demolition.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is there anyone opposed? Okay. So also under our new business, we do have a property at 15 Marvin Court that is interested in a local historic nomination. So at this point, since we do have a couple new members, and this is new to the agenda, I was going to turn this over to Mara so she can kind of describe the local historic nomination process.
So it's been a while. Those of you that are on the commission now, we just did the Lustrons, but that was a commission initiated local nomination. It's probably been, I think Doug, you might be the only one still on from the last one we did as an individual where a property owner came in and asked for a nomination. It was a house that had been in very bad condition and they completely renovated it. And they had come in and asked for it to be nominated. So it's been, and I want to say that might have been 2016. So it's been at least 5, 6, 7 years at this
I don't
point.
recall it actually.
Okay.
Even before my time.
I remember those pretty well. So we did have one. I wanted to quickly go through what a nomination includes. There's always the opportunity. The commission is allowed to nominate something. An individual property owner can come in and ask for it to be nominated, or the city council can ask for something to be nominated. In this case, we have a property owner who's asking for the nomination. This has the criteria of under such investigation as it deems necessary, make a determination whether the property, structure, site, area, or district meets one or more of the following criteria. And I kind of underlined some of the criteria that I think could apply to this particular request. The first one is its character, interest, or value as a part of the development, heritage, or cultural characteristics of the community. Its identification with a person or persons who significantly contributed to the development of the community. There's a whole bunch of other ones. You have to just follow under one. But the last one is its potential to yield information important to history and prehistory. So I think those are the 3 characteristics that probably would be that we would follow, this would fall under. You remember with the Lustrons, we also had some architectural elements and things like that. I think these are the strongest, but others might come up as we continue our discussion. But it's any structure, property, or area that meets one or more of the above criteria shall also have significant integrity of location, design, materials, and workmanship to make it worthy of preservation and or potential restoration. And then I just wanted to remind us all about like how the process works. It starts with staff and HPC research. So an application comes in or the commission itself applies, starts this application process. We pull together research. for all of our different items that we will put as the evidence to move towards the nomination. We have to have at least a 7-day minimum notification before holding a hearing. We typically hold the hearing at a regular meeting date of the Historic Preservation Commission. After holding that hearing, we have to have at least minimum of 15 days of a letter that we send out to the applicant or property owner to let them know the determination of what we are sending to the city council. After that, we have to have at least 15 days minimum notification to get to the city council hearing. And then you have to have another 15 days after you've approved it to provide a letter of determination. So all that's in our code of how we need to follow things. And you'll all remember, for those that were here for the Lustrons, we did that and we kind of stretched it out a lot with our early research, and we added in a whole nother set of hearings before we had the formal hearing to talk with all the various property owners, because it was a little more complicated. So then I wanted to, so here's an example, or this is the schedule that we were hoping to move forward with, because we do have so much of the documentation already gathered. That we would hold potentially a historic preservation public hearing on Tuesday, October 10th, which would be our next meeting. We have enough time to get the proper notification in time for that meeting date. That would then move towards holding a city council public hearing at the Tuesday, November 7th date, with the possibility of having that first and second reading on the ordinance, designating it as local historic structure on that same date, and then going to a third reading of the ordinance on Tuesday, November 21st. We then have to send a letter of determination out to the property owner within 15 days of it being approved. Again, this can shift slightly in one way or the other, but this was just sort of the basic, here's how we could move this through the process. So the next thing I wanted
Can I
to,
ask a-
oh yeah, sorry.
That's as soon as we can do it, right?
That's as soon as we can do
okay.
it. That's
Okay.
the earliest we could do.
Okay.
Because we want to usually, we need to gather all the documentation together. For those that remember, for the Lustron, I had probably a packet about this thick, if not more, where we had all the articles we'd found, all the documentation we'd found. We have to put all that together, and the ordinance has to create a document that shows everything that we found for all the evidence to move it forward. And then that evidence can also be used if they want to move even farther forward into something that would be a National Register nomination. In most cases, a lot of our locals have enough to be important to the community. They don't always have the ability to go to that next step, but we always like to try to provide as much as we can. So the next thing is just to orient you to this particular property. I've highlighted the property in red. For those that, let's see if I can do, this is Brentwood Boulevard that then changes to Kirkham. This, for most people know, this is the Veta Soccer Dome. And you can see the property right here highlighted in red. I did also provide, which was in the packet, this is the 1955 aerial photograph, where you can see that in 1955, they had started clearing out the property to start building the subdivision, the Benny Gordon subdivision. So that just kind of helps you orient you for where we are today, and then where it was when a lot of this process started. I'm not going to go through again, because we'll be holding that public hearing. I'm not going to go through all the documentation I provided. There's also a lot more that's been found since this packet went out to you all. I was able to get all the Plan Commission and City Council minutes from the original approval of the subdivision in 1955, as well as all the Plan Commission and Council minutes for the 1964 rezoning of all the property around it, including the rest of the subdivision. I was also able to find the minutes from the Board of Adjustment, because initially that this house was denied from being able to be built, and they had to get a variance from the Board of Adjustment to get the house built. But I thought it would be interesting for you to just at least see, this is the subdivision plat that was approved by the Plan Commission and City Council. 15, which was the model home, was on this far corner right here. So this is Kirkham, that's now Brentwood on this side, and then Lafayette on this side. And then the street had gone through, but it was vacated as a part of the rezoning of everything to industrial. And so now the driveway has become the street name. So there is only one house on Marvin Court. I did find there's quite a few articles through newspapers.com that had articles or ads in the St. Louis Argus that had trying to promote the subdivision. So we had a lot of that. There were other articles and things in there, but we haven't even gone. There's probably still multiple other steps where we could find more information. Excuse me, more information. I mainly used the word Marvin Court. I used the word Gordon and Benny Gordon. I'm sure if we start using some other names, there would be other ways for us to find even more information. So I'm gonna kind of leave it at this, and yes.
Was there ever more than one house?
Yeah.
Okay, I
only
didn't
one
think so, I
house.
just wanted to
Yeah,
make sure.
only one house.
Okay,
And then, and you have the opportunity, you can't see everybody that's here, but there are at least, you know, both the applicant who's going to apply to have the historic, as well as an additional person who's done a lot of research, who got a lot of this started and connected up. They're both here and could probably talk a little bit more if there's other, again, I'm not going into, there is such a story to all of this, and there's a lot of information to this. That would probably be appropriate at the public hearing as we pull everything together. But I'd love for them to be able to tell you a little bit more why this is coming up, why they're wanting to do this, just so that you're aware, to help think through anything else you might want to pull together before the public hearing.
Has one question.
Yeah.
When you do this report to designate the area, should this go forward, how much are you allowed to editorialize versus just the facts, ma'am? Because there are underlying, from what I read, and I didn't read it all as carefully, it's like, sure, I'll admit that, but it kind of looks like there's a thing going through there that, like, they were trying to make sure that he couldn't build. Is that why?
Sure.
And I don't know if that's appropriate for the report, or, you know, say, you know, city's got LCRA's, land clearance for redevelopment authorities, for a reason. And I'm just wondering if that's the case.
So I think you have the ability to, it's supposed to be more about just the facts. And I think that they are attempting, there's going to be other ways to get more of the story out when it comes to other means of talking more about this overall. But we probably can delve a little bit deeper into the code. The way the code reads is you provide all of the reasons for why it should be designated and protected. And that can be a little bit more about what we believe happened back then versus the exact facts. So I think we have some flexibility. Okay.
And I just want to point out, what room are we in right now?
Yes, we're in the Benny Gordon room.
Yes. Yeah.
We are in the Benny Gordon room. Yeah, which is very appropriate.
Yes.
So, Anne, if you want to, because again, I'm gonna step back because I'm just gave you the rest of the information as staff and let you as the chair coordinate anything
Yeah.
else.
First, I just want to say thank you to our visitors who have come to our meeting tonight. We appreciate your time with us. And yes, anyone who would like to speak in regards to 15 Marvin Court and the local historic nomination process, feel free to. Again, kind of just reiterate what Mara said. This is not the public hearing. So we definitely want to hear from you, but again, more of the details will come out at the public hearing meeting. And I can't see everybody, so whoever wants to start off.
I can barely hear it.
I think it's over as far as it can.
It's over as far as it can go.
Okay. Well.
Can you see me?
One more thing.
Almost.
More.
A little bit.
Okay.
Okay.
Alright.
No, one more.
Okay.
One more.
We have.
Okay.
You want
So,
me to start?
okay, you start.
start.
Okay, I'll start. My name is Gail Jones, and I am the owner of 15 Marvin Court. My mom and dad, purchased the home. I was born in 56. And my mom was like 8 months pregnant with me or something. But anyway, when they actually purchased the home, I think it was that next January in 1957. So basically, it was just my mom, my dad, and my sister. And all I remember is that growing up, our home was display home for Benny Gordon, which was to be a subdivision. And then as I grew up later, I found out that the subdivision fell through. There were people that, this is what I've been told on Newport, that sold some of their homes, went to Roosevelt Federal in Webster Groves on Lockwood at the time, and said that they were gonna boycott if they financed the money for this Black developer, Benny Gordon, to build out this subdivision. And then it fell through. And that's all I remember growing up in the display home, which was the first and only home that he was allowed to build. And then now my mom, my dad, and my sister all passed away. I'm living in the home. My mom died in 2005. So I moved back home, so I'm still in my childhood home. And then later on, here I turned 66 last December. Then all of a sudden, then this was
Then you
where,
got a call from me.
and then this is where Pastor Danoon comes in, and I just met him. And then the story, all of a sudden, it's kind of like this, I don't know what you call it, black cloud, black mark, something that was hidden in the history of Webster all of these years. And now I'm 66 years old, and the story has resurfaced. And then this is where I met Pastor Danoon. So you
Yeah.
take it from there.
And I'm David Danoon. I'm the pastor of the First Congregational Church across the street. And I'm sorry, I'm recovering from COVID, so I'm still required by the CDC to have a mask on. So that's why I'm dressed this way. But in January of each year, my church, which was the first church in Webster Groves, celebrates its anniversary. And so every year I try to find somebody to talk about who's significant to the history of the church. And Gail's mother, Thyra Bonds, was the person who I discovered at the end of 2022, quite accidentally. And so I started doing, but she was a member of our church from about 1964,
Yeah, we grew up
somewhere around
in
there.
First Congregation.
And so I started doing some research, and one of the first things I came across was Bonds versus Webster Groves, which was the lawsuit that Thyra and Melvin Bonds brought against the city after they were left in a property island, which you see described in some of the documentation that you have. Of course, I'm the pastor. I got kind of concerned about it, but didn't know what had happened to them or anything like that, and despaired for being able to know. And then in February of 2023, I think it was the second week of February, 2 weeks after I preached this sermon, there's an article on the front of the Webster Kirkwood Times, in which the main person in the story is Gail Jones, who's taken a bunch of her friends on a shopping spree in Old Webster.
Yeah.
And the third paragraph is a shout out to First Congregational Church, where she grew up. I had despaired for being able to find anybody. I hadn't looked really at Marvin Court, 15 Marvin Court yet, and was just very excited to get connected with her. What's now unfolded is a bunch of the artifacts that remain from the sale of the house, and still more about Mrs. Bonds, who was an amazing woman, and just the fact that this was, as far as I can tell, the first subdivision created by an African American for African Americans in Webster Groves. It's the way that you see things here. If you don't know that the St. Louis Argus is a Black owned publication, you might not realize that. But the first ad that I found for the subdivision was in the Globe Democrat in the colored only real estate section. So there is just so much. I mean, the fact that it's Benny Gordon who put this, who wanted to put this together, and his influence in the area, and the fact that there was a lawsuit that was brought against the city, and that it just it reeks of systemic racism. And just the fact that the story isn't told. I mean, I would have never known that, first of all, that North Webster actually extended across what then was Kirkham into my neighborhood, to the just west of Tuxedo Park. And that this, as it's unfolding, we just keep discovering more and more about our community. It's been, I think it's been glossed over a little. I love Ann Morris, but there's somehow no mention of it in North Webster, the photographic history, or in, and there's just a photograph of Benny Gordon with his testimony in Lift Every Voice. And the LCRA, just the work of the Land Clearance and Reclamation, or for Reclamation Authority, and how it pretty much obliterated much of residential North Webster in the 1950s and 60s, is so revealing and so stunning. It's a story that deserves to be told. And a property that deserves to be preserved.
Yes, definitely.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. Excuse me, thank you so much. I don't know if we have any other visitors that would like to speak.
No, thank you. I'm happy to be here learning. Thanks.
Well, again, we appreciate you coming, and obviously Historic Preservation Commission, this is what we're passionate about, and it's a lot of learning about our history, learning stories, and it's exciting to see how much information we currently have for this property.
And do you want
oh,
to check and see like what else you might think you need as I'm starting to?
Yes, I was just going to ask as far as what is the next steps in this process leading up into the public hearing that would you would need from the commission.
Get the drawings, perhaps, of the home.
No,
Okay,
no, we're not required to keep those for more than technically 5 years. So we don't have the drawings of the home. I had not yet looked for the building permit for it. So I know we can look in the, now that we have a little bit more of a time frame of when we could look through the library documentation for the building permit.
yeah.
Was trying to think of other things. I had not continued. So when I did the search in newspapers.com, I had not started looking with the bonds name because that might also we might find some more information. Benny's name was misspelled a few times. So you have to sometimes look it up under both the spellings. Bennie, and they have it sometimes there's a Y, so that was taking a little long. So the search that I did for the ones that I did find so far was literally using just Marvin Court and Benny Gordon with the IE, I believe, were the only ones that I started with. So someone else wanted to do more with newspapers.com. There could be some additional, and then I still need to provide all of you with the minutes from the meetings, because that also might have a few more names that we might be able to use for looking for information.
I'll definitely dig into the newspaper.com. You know that I love doing that because
I know
it takes you down that rabbit hole. It's fun. So
I went, it was a very scary rabbit hole. I was supposed
Yes.
to be going to council meeting and I just kept looking. I was like, oh, I found another one. Oh, I found another one. And then
Yeah.
finally I had to like stop and
You
go.
just knew it.
It was last Tuesday. Well, no, I was here. I was downstairs waiting. So yeah, it's very easy to go down. And I found some other things that weren't in here, like when I was looking for information on the other house on Euclid, I found like the Benny Gordon's, they had a holiday party with their entire development company with everybody, and I had a bunch of different names, and the names of the Hubbards who lived at 12 Euclid were in at the holiday party for
Oh,
the Gordon
interesting.
Development Company. So that overlap, I found that even though it didn't particularly pertain to this, to Marvin Court. So there's some other things in there that I'm sure we could find, because again, newspapers.com's got some great stuff. So easy way to search. And we have the full, we are renewed again for 6 months for using it through our funds with the historic preservation.
I can check.
Perfect.
For the building permit.
That would be awesome. Okay, so I've got Carol said she'd look for the building permit. And then newspapers, and you were gonna take those on?
Yes.
Excuse me, Mara.
Yes.
Real quick, on the minutes that you did find, or you're still looking?
Nope, I found them all.
So did it, remember, was it something that would indicate from the documentation that we have where they approved the Benny Gordon subdivision, as you can see, it was approved?
Yep.
To then where they rezoned it to light industrial, then what's in the middle that made them do that other than the obvious?
In the minutes, there's nothing in the middle.
See, that's
There's
what's stopping us.
nothing in the middle. Yeah, I went backwards as much as I could. When you read them, it's in the last email I sent out to that bigger group. On the plan commission, it's all of a sudden, like everything was approved.
Yes.
And then a few years went by, and then it's LCRA
Mhm.
making the request to rezone to industrial.
Yeah.
I didn't find anything in between.
Yeah.
But if someone wants to scour a little bit more, I've got the hard copies of the minutes from the attic. Did a little attic diving.
Was it cleared before the subdivision was planned?
So. No, so here's the clearing for the subdivision. And then this is 1955, so you can see all the houses, all of this was rezoned to industrial, all up in here.
And
All
we
of
don't
those
even
houses.
know.
Yeah,
No,
in
but-
1964 it was reasoned.
No, but like, before, when the subdivision was proposed, was there anything there before the subdivision?
Oh.
Just in the subdivision.
Oh, in
Right.
this little land
Yeah.
area,
There was at least one 3-bedroom home that Gordon said had 12 people living in it.
Oh, wow.
but yeah, the aerials before this, so the 55 is a great aerial on St. Louis County's website. Once you try to go before that, it gets kind of blurry and muddy. They do have a 1937 aerial that we can go to. So it's 37, 55. Then there's one from the 60s that's hard to read. The 70s is horrible. Once you get into the 80s, then you can start seeing a little bit better. But those are all those are all after.
So, yeah, I mean, you can see that trapezoid of space, like where all those homes were,
Mm-hmm.
and all those homes are not now.
Mm-hmm.
It had been, what I've discovered is that it was originally a Danish neighborhood. And there's a Lutheran church called Bethany Lutheran that
Yeah.
recently closed, that is nearby, that was Danish Lutheran, and so that's.
So
a lot-
again,
A lot
all
of
the time.
connections there, and
With
then
ties.
between 1920 and 1930. It went from being a Danish neighborhood to being a black neighborhood, and that may have been because of the building of the new First Baptist Church building in 1927
On Kirkland.
across the road, yeah. So one of the things that occurred to us as we were thinking about this, and the reason why we are coming to you all for historic preservation status, is that had Gail not been able to assume the ownership of the property after the death of her mother, I personally am concerned that we would have had one more property zoned light industrial in a short order, in very short order. And my own sense is that this house, not only because of its historic nature, but also just because I think it deserves protected status so that our industrial park doesn't gain one more bit of property there. In fact, ideally, what would happen is that one of those businesses is gonna have to be sold, and we can we can put Marvin Court in.
So just, I mean, I had a conversation with somebody over the last couple of days about this exact situation here. And I don't wanna speak for her, so I'm not gonna say her name on the public meeting, but it's just really interesting how we as Webster, we never talk about this.
Exactly.
Nobody knows about this.
That's
We
what
talked
we're
about
talking
Beach
about.
Park, we talked
Right.
about Brentwood, and
Exactly.
how our neighboring cities do these horrible things and
Right.
taking property and we do the
That's
same
why-
thing and we don't
Mhm.
talk about it.
That's what I had told Pastor Danoon when I met him. I said, I grew up, my family, at First Congregational Church. And, now I'm at One Family Church in U City. And the pastor was recently speaking on, I forget what the message was, but it was about how when you're telling a story, it's really the Lord's story, but he chooses people who he wants to tell his story. And I told Pastor Danoon, I said, I think he's chose you and me to tell this story, all over again that just came up out of nowhere. I'm 66 years old and all of a sudden it's like, this story needs to be told.
And I think we're mature enough to be able to handle it.
Yeah.
Anyone
Okay.
else feel like you need any more information? Because if not, what I'm gonna do is start creating the documents that we need for the public hearing. Unless anyone else feels like there's anything else. I'll send out the minutes because that would give you some additional things to read ahead of time.
Who would oppose this? The industrial district?
Well, we'll hold a public hearing, the
And
sign
we'll
will be in
find
the
out.
yard.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm just thinking, who would oppose this? It's history. It is.
I'll gather the rest of the information and I'll also send out the minutes that I've gathered from the attic so that you guys can read those. And
And then
if anyone else-
anything we find, we pass to you.
Yes,
And then is there
please.
anything else that you would need from the commission prior to next month's public hearing?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you all very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very
Thank you for
much.
coming.
Yeah.
Thank you again for coming.
Thank you. And then
Oh,
you have-
okay, here. I actually have extras.
You take that? Okay. Thank you so much. Well,
Bye.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of our new business. Our old business from last month's meeting, we had continued our discussion on future projects and one of the projects that is a passion project to a member is the conservation districts. I unfortunately had some family health issues this past month, so I was not able to do the amount of research that I wanted to. And I know we are down a few members this evening. And Mara, I believe you said we might have one more new member joining us.
We should have another new member joining us. And one more is interviewing at the next meeting of the council. So I would assume that we will likely have one more member for next month.
So if anybody has anything that they'd like to discuss regarding upcoming projects or specifically in regards to the conservation districts, feel free to. I just didn't know if we wanted, because of the full agenda that we had this evening, if we wanted to kind of postpone that discussion until a future meeting.
I'm fine with postponing until a future meeting, especially since we'll have more people who can hear the discussion. I think that would be helpful. And Mara, I don't know if you saw it, but I had forwarded to you that webinar. I found the link. Both Mara and I had looked and couldn't find it, but then I found it. And it is a very good webinar. It's out of the Denver area. It's about conservation districts. And they have some really good documentation. And they have good explanations about the difference between a conservation district and an historic district. And there's other information that I think is really worthwhile, because we were talking about how conservation districts could work with the comprehensive plan. And instead of just being architectural or being historic, conservation districts can be used for other things in other areas, like to protect natural resources or to protect like the pedestrian oriented nature of a neighborhood. So we can maybe consider how we want to approach this as far as the conservation districts, if we want to stick to it as for our commission strictly historic, or broaden it out like Mara had mentioned, and maybe do something in conjunction with the plan commission. So anything that might eventually be written about a process for conservation districts could touch on several different areas. That's just kind of a general thought, but if, Mara, if you have that link.
I'll go back and find that and send that out.
And if you can't find it, because I know you get a lot of stuff, ping me and I'll send it to you again, so it'll be on the top of the list.
I think I flagged it. I just right now, the number of things flagged is so long of things that I have to take care of.
Good.
It's getting pretty red. But I remember you sending it because you'd found it and I kept looking and looking, and I kept finding other ones by the same group, but I couldn't find that one. So I'm glad you did. So I'll send that one out. And since we'll have the public hearing next meeting, maybe put it on for 2 meetings from now.
That sounds reasonable,
If
and
that works.
just so you know, when you open that email with the link, it's like, well, there's nothing here. And there's just a big blank space, and then you have to kind of scroll down to where the meat of it is.
I'll make notes on that.
This is a change to the charter. Like this idea of a conservation district.
No, it wouldn't be a charter change, but it could potentially be a zoning code change for adding a conservation district. There's ways that you can either add it in the zoning code, you can add it in the historic preservation chapter. So there's a historic preservation chapter that we made changes to, gosh, was it 2 years ago at this point?
Oh, it's been longer than that.
Uh-huh.
You mean that
We-
added the
It was-
50-year and 100-year? Yeah.
2019.
2019.
Yeah.
So we have done code amendments to the historic preservation section.
Yeah.
So you can add it just as overlays in historic preservation. You can also add it in zoning districts. You can add it in code sections that are related to green space. So there's a lot of different ways, which is why we're wanting to do some research on how could it be included, or what does it mean? Whether is it something that we want to take on? And then I also had found, so we attended that webinar, and then I found another city in Missouri who attended the same webinar, and they brought it up at their plan commission, I believe. And I found their minutes, and they found an example of a city that they had researched about potentially adding it to their code. So I have to go back and find it, because I did find a link, and I laughed because I was looking for other conservation districts within Missouri. And I ended up finding, again, like their minutes said, and we watched this webinar, and I was like, that's the same webinar we attended. That was pretty funny. And it's somewhere else in Missouri. So we're gonna have, it's more of a, is this potentially a project they want to take on, and how? And then there's all these other layers that we've got. A updated comprehensive plan that we've got coming up. So there's maybe other ways it might be integrated. And at this point, it's just an early conversation.
And I think too, depending upon how things turn out with the conservation plan, the conservation districts could be a really good mechanism to fine tune and accomplish what's in the comprehensive plan. I think it has the possibility of being a really good tool to accomplish a lot of different goals in a lot of different areas. And you can write who, you know, what the process is, who initiates it, how it's initiated. Those things can all be tailored. I was just, noodling around on the internet. Kansas City has a ton of them. And they have some really good examples too.
And I found a few things and then I got sidetracked and didn't send it off to anyone. So I'll send those off and then send the link off. And then we'll have probably a full, or other 3 members plus the other new member, because we're missing 4 tonight, essentially. So we're kind of down to barely half.
All right. Does anybody have any other questions or anything else to add to tonight's meeting?
Any updates from council?
Not from council really. I was trying to think of any, but I did, I was at the Missouri Municipal League meeting yesterday and today in Kansas City and went to some interesting sessions. And one of them was on that Main Street, Main Street USA, there's like a Main Street, program. It's a federal program, but you can have it in different states and cities, and that was good. The presentation was mostly by people from Excelsior Springs who had done it, and they actually formed a nonprofit that does a lot of things for kind of like their main drag, like their downtown area. They do like the planters, they do the events, they do all of this, and they overlay with the city, so they're using like Public Works to do this and, planning, whatever, but it was a really kind of an interesting concept, and the way they described it, and I'll see if I can download the slides and send them out, but the way they described it was like economic development with like a historic preservation like focus, because they want to preserve the facades and the buildings and do new roofs in these historic downtown areas, and also like bring business and bring tax income and that type of thing. So it was kind of interesting. I mean, it's been around for a while. Did they talk about it when they were here from the state, from DNR? I feel like I'd heard about it a little bit before, but
It's a
maybe
separate.
not. And in the exhibitor booth, I saw the guy that came and talked to us from DNR about grants and things. So
From the State Historic Preservation.
yeah, which is part of DNR, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I was like, hey, but yeah, it was a good thing. And but the Main Street thing is intriguing. I don't know if that's a fit for Webster or not, or if we would need that or not, but I thought it was really just kind of an interesting thing. And I think that somebody is getting a facade grant, but maybe it's not through Main Street.
Well, so the Crossroads Taxing District has a facade program
Also,
already.
Okay.
And then the taxing district for Old Orchard has some other programs that they do. And then Old Webster doesn't do any of those, but it's a National Register Historic District already. So we kind of have it without being a Main Street.
yeah.
Because we have our special taxing districts that takes care of the pocket, we've gotten federal funding for the streetscape for Old Orchard, and we have federal funding for the streetscape for Crossroads, and in the past we had funding for the streetscape in Old Webster. So we sort of have all of that without doing the Main Street program with them. But yeah,
It was an interesting program.
there's some
Yeah.
cool things that they do.
Yeah.
And I don't want to forget, and I'll send an email out, and Hillary, you might know more about this one, but Sue forwarded me a invite from the Historical Society for an event coming up to invite everybody from Historic Preservation Commission. So I will send that. I keep forgetting. It's another thing I have flagged.
I have a physical card that's the invitation, if you want me to.
I've got a digital invitation she sent me. I just need to send it out. I just need to, maybe when I go back down to my desk before I leave, I will send both of those items out before I leave so that I don't forget.
That reminds me, I also went to an open house for the Peace Project. That was really
Just
interesting.
tonight, you know?
I didn't go to that
Oh,
one
I was
because,
there last night.
yeah, I went to one that was in Eden over the weekend. Did you go tonight?
Tonight, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, got that. little-
Yeah. So I thought it was really interesting when we had talked before. I think there were, at that time, we didn't think any of the church itself was going to be preserved, but it sounds like they are planning now to preserve the chapel and turn it into like a community space. But I know these aren't the final plans, but they've really taken a lot of things into consideration with this plan. And If you haven't already seen it, there's a link on Hillary's brochure.
Yeah, my QR code if you want.
But it's really intriguing, and I know they're doing a lot of different kind of sessions to hear people's questions and things, so. If you're interested in that, check it out.
Yeah, they said tonight that they're not really getting opposition, but as we were talking about earlier, you know. People will show up at the final public meeting and scream about how it could never happen because it's. When I said, I made a comment tonight about, you know, traffic and noise, and I said, old people walking, using walkers to walk around the neighborhoods, because Paul actually heard that one time in Creve Coeur. Is that they were mad that the old people would walk on their sidewalks with walkers.
They pay taxes and they can use those signs.
And they're including like what we have like penciled in at least walking paths on the property.
Yeah. And the trees are all gonna
The
stay.
trees are staying, they're gonna plant more trees as a buffer with their near neighbor, and see, the other thing that was interesting, oh, where the church is now will be, nothing will be closer to that kind of Lockwood and Plant Corner than what the church is now, it'll all be behind that.
Okay.
Yeah, and as an architect, I'm not an architect, but you know, they have the 3 windows right on the front, one in the middle is taller. They're gonna replicate that on the new part, which will be to the east of the church. So that the new building will also have, you know, 3 arches.
That's how they're rendered. We'll see how they-
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
but those guys, those architects are good. I like them.
Okay.
Yeah. Sure.
And on the
If anybody wants
website,
to
they
see
have
that,
like
let's
more
see that.
renderings and more
Yeah, I'll do
views
that.
and things like that. And there's also a survey, well, you can go to the top link and get to the survey too, but there's a link for the survey. Where like if you have questions or you have concerns, you can enter them and we'll take into it, but Peace will remain basically like a controlling partner in this, as opposed to selling it privately, so they're really invested in the community and making it done right, so make sure it's done right, so
Is it off the market now? Then, I guess.
I would assume so.
Yeah.
Eventually.
I think that's Metallica sign's still out there.
Yeah, I think it is too.
It'll stay there.
Their next step is to go for the
They haven't
light,
met with me at
yeah.
all.
I think
They
they,
haven't talked to me.
I
at all.
think they're waiting, they're doing the low income tax thing first.
I think you're right,
today.
because see, they asked about the tax credits and they said they don't get them in December, they're not gonna go forward.
Yeah, they're like that's a go, no go, so they'll probably come to you after that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
No one's come to talk to me.
I would have said something.
Is this gonna come across our commissions?
Well, so again, I don't know because no one has come to talk to me about the property at all whatsoever, so. I don't know what they're proposing, I haven't seen anything, they haven't asked me any questions, no one has met with me, so. Once I know what they propose, I can probably figure out what their steps are.
Well, and I don't know, and maybe you do, but a lot of times using federal tax dollars triggers SHPO or triggers an EIS or an EA.
Yeah.
But I don't know if the Missouri tax credits count as federal dollars because maybe Missouri got them from feds. You know, so.
Yeah, and I mean, unless they're completely tearing down the structure, it wouldn't come before you. If there's a partial tear down, it goes to ARB for its certificate of appropriateness. It's not, currently, it's not either a local historic or in a historic structure in any manner as of yet. But yeah.
Mara, I know you don't know possibly for certain, but next month with the public hearing, I know you said that the next couple of months we might have more demolition requests than usual. Do you know kind of a guesstimate for next month?
I don't know how many more they are bringing in. I'll check and see. I didn't see any new ones on my desk. But I think the deadline's not for another week. But as soon as I know, I'll let you all know. It really helps when you look at them ahead of time as much as possible in the packets so that we're not sort of trying to flip through everything and look at it. But I think you all did a great job today going through them and reviewing them ahead of time because I think it helped. And I think we would still have more than enough time for a hearing, even if we had a couple on.
Okay.
And the hearing actually happens before the demolition recommendations in
Okay.
our agenda. Our hearings always happen first. So you would approve minutes and go straight to the hearing. So that would be great.
The concerns I have with demolitions, but they're all localized to a small area, and some of them are actually pretty nice houses. And when you had mentioned like on the lot where 12 Euclid is, you couldn't develop like a single family house there. Some of the lots look even smaller. So I was wondering if the same analysis was done. Are they gonna be vacant? Are we gonna build something else there, or is it just gonna be a vacant lot? It's good housing, and there's really nothing wrong with those rentals that we agreed to. Most of them are perfectly fine. Structurally, they look good. But, I mean, they have the right to destroy them. I suppose I was also wondering, kind of a second thing was, with a conservation mindset, are we looking at types of housing structures as a value? Lower income duplex type rent is kind of valuable for a lot of people, and we're gonna lose that.
So that's one of the reasons why we have what we have today in terms of the demolition requests. For structures and houses that are smaller, that have the ability to be saved and other things like that. Their plan, we don't have a plan for what they propose to do. A lot of those are already in areas that have the ability to go to be rezoned to multifamily. Which there's very few of those properties within the city right now. So I know that when they took down 3 others up on Euclid, they did a planned environment unit and were able to get 6 smaller homes on, where they were only able to do 3 large homes. They went through that procedure with the Plan Commission and the City Council, got approved for the planned environment unit, which allowed the smaller, numbers. They've come forward with their development plan, which they had to do within a certain time frame, and then the architect is currently working on the housing types for that one. I don't know necessarily what they're doing for this other piece. Some of them have been vacant for a while and have not been rentals, but you are correct, some are rentals. We get to that point where it comes down to, it's their right to ask for it. This commission has to look at, is there some historic value to it that we need to save? Which is a little bit different than our zoning code, trying to get 2-family structures into the code, multifamily into the code, having opportunities, or potentially changing the zoning code. That's a plan commission thing of not having minimum lot sizes, or not having single family zoning. That's a bigger national question that's going on right now. So those are other things that would be taken up by the plan commission or the council. This focus would be, is it a historic structure? Is there a reason why we need to save it? Because we've had some that we've lost that we probably shouldn't have lost.
That's the,
For 2019, there was nothing we could do. They would just come and give us the information. We had planned to do this, and so it was our job to try to talk them out of it, of which would never be successful. So now with Mara led the cause to get the new ordinance that had teeth to it, so we could say no.
Right, and now we can hold, like, in regards to the 12 Euclid, this gives us an additional month to then do additional research. What was it, probably 2 years ago now? There was a house that came through that the neighbor was wanting to purchase and tear down and build a new home. We were able, because of the age of the house and some of the missing history, hold that off for additional research, which we ended up not really finding much more on the house, but we did find more on the land and the property around the house and the subdivision that it's in. But because we did put this on hold and dug a little deeper, that buyer decided not to proceed. And it was, from what I was told, purchased by somebody who was going to
They're living
renovate
in
it,
it
so.
and renovating it and doing additions to it.
Yeah, it came through the ARB, and I was delighted to see that it had been saved, and they're doing very sensitive additions to it, so that was good.
Do we ever proactively look at a property at risk, when it's been vacant, obviously?
So there are so many on our list. There's so many that we just haven't done that.
There is a list, though.
There's a
Big,
list.
long
Yeah.
list. It's a really long list. We do have a map that shows everything that's over 100 years old. So even if we just focused on things over 100 years old, we'd have a very, very, very large list of ones to address. So it's pretty. If this is a great volunteer group, but this volunteer group doesn't have the time to take care of it, and I, as a single staff person, can't do it. Yeah, I wish.
There was also the discussion of the at-risk properties where you kind of have to step delicately around that as well, because what determines what's an at-risk property or what makes it at risk? I know we've had that conversation several times when discussing how to be a little bit more proactive, and there's a lot that
Sometimes you
Is
put
in-
out that list of at risk, and that's really the list that then the developers go straight to use that because they feel like they're at risk, which means that they're in bad condition. So that's the way you could go grab at it and make contact for a demolition.
But if they're at risk because it's an elderly couple and they can't do the maintenance and they're living in there because there's no place else for them to go, and you say, bye, you gotta get out. You know, what are you gonna do with those people?
It's sort of all over the place. But we keep trying to tell neighbors, they'll complain about an elderly person who's not maintaining their property, but they won't go help that elderly person that's not maintaining their property. Now, sometimes the neighbor doesn't want the help, but that's where we're struggling a lot, where there's issues with code enforcement and neighbors will complain about it, but they won't have taken those extra steps to potentially provide the help. And then the properties spiral further deeper into being at risk.
Back to all the questions. Did we ever have a grant program for the commission or considered one?
We have not, because again, it kind of comes down to staffing, figuring out who gets a grant, how do you monitor it, how do you fund it? There's a lot to it. So we do try to encourage and get people to, if it's nominated, find either programs where they can get funding or historic tax credits or other things like that. There have been the Tuxedo Park, the bed and breakfast, that was the old church that was on the National Register. It had been vacant for 10 years. And they finally, by piecing everything together and working with someone, they used historic tax credits for their renovation. And we worked with them on their conditional use permit to be the bed and breakfast and the building permits and all of the other pieces coming together. There's also, we added another building to the National Register boundaries in Old Webster, and some tax credits were used on one of the properties on Gore. There's been a couple others that have used historic tax credits for preservation.
All right, if there's nothing else, our next meeting, obviously we are going to have a public hearing, is on October 10th. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. Thank you, everyone.
Welcome aboard. You're with us.